The dog's teeth were inches from the shelter worker's throat when I stepped through that door. Everyone frozen, the growl coming from somewhere deep, primal. I didn't move fast, didn't speak. Just stood there in the doorway of that Memphis animal shelter, afternoon light cutting through the dust behind me, and met those wild brown eyes with my own. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I'm 71 now, sitting on my porch in North Memphis with that same dog sleeping at my feet. His name is Gunner, though that's not what they called him at the shelter. They called him aggressive, dangerous, unadoptable. Same words I've heard about men who look like me my whole life. The words that follow you home from war and settle into your bones like shrapnel you can't extract. My hands shake sometimes when I drink my coffee, not from age but from memories that won't stay buried. The VA doctor says it's PTSD. I say it's just the cost of coming home when parts of you never do. Gunner understands that. I see it in the way he startles at loud noises, the way he positions himself between me and the door, the way he doesn't trust easy. We're both carrying invisible wounds, him and me. The morning sun hits the oak tree in my front yard the same way it hit the sand in Kuwait 33 years ago. And sometimes I forget which war I'm remembering. My daughter says I should write this down. What happened at that shelter? How a broken dog and a broken man found each other. So here it is. The truth of it. Not the sanitized version people want to hear, but the real one, with all its rough edges and uncomfortable silences. It was a Tuesday when I decided I needed a dog. Not wanted. Needed. The kind of need that keeps you up at night, that makes the walls of your house feel like they're closing in. My wife died 3 years back, cancer, and my son moved to California for work. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that lets the war sounds creep back in. The helicopters, the screaming, the silence after explosions that's somehow louder than the blast itself. I'd tried the usual things: church on Sundays, coffee with other veterans at the VFW hall, volunteer work at the soup kitchen. But the silence always won. It waited for me at home, patient and hungry. A dog seemed simple enough. Companionship without complications. Someone to break the quiet without asking questions I didn't want to answer. I'd seen the commercials, the adoption drives, the feel-good stories about rescue animals. Seemed like the kind of thing a man was supposed to do when he got old and lonely. Give some shelter dog a second chance. I drove to the Memphis Animal Services shelter on Chulahoma Road. The building squat and practical, chain-link fences and concrete runs, the sound of barking echoing off cinder block walls. The shelter was chaos when I walked in. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 25, was pressed against the wall, her face pale with fear. The dog, Gunner, though I didn't know his name yet, was loose in the lobby area, a pit bull mix with a scarred face and one torn ear. He was between her and the door, teeth bared, that growl rolling up from his chest like distant thunder. 2 other workers were frozen behind the reception desk, one with a phone in her hand, probably calling animal control. The manager, a middle-aged white man with a name tag that read Dennis, was holding a catch pole, trying to figure out his angle of approach. Everyone was terrified. The air was electric with it, that particular frequency of fear that makes people do stupid things. I'd seen it before in combat zones, right before everything goes sideways. Dennis saw me enter and his eyes went wide. "Sir, you need to leave. Now. We have a situation." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. The dog's eyes flicked to me when he spoke, assessing, calculating. I've been evaluated that same way by men holding rifles, by sergeants looking for weakness, by cops at traffic stops trying to decide what kind of threat I posed. I raised my hand slowly, palm out, universal sign for peace. Didn't say anything yet. The dog was watching me now, ignoring the girl against the wall. His ears were back, but not flat. Aggressive, but not committed. There's a difference. I learned to read body language in places where misreading it got you killed. In the villages outside Basra. In the streets of Kuwait City when things went wrong during Desert Storm. In the Alabama backroads of my childhood when white boys in pickup trucks decided to follow my daddy home from work. You learn to see the difference between posturing and real intent. This dog was scared, not vicious. Scared things are dangerous, sure, but in a different way. Predictable, if you know what to look for. "I got this," I said quietly, not to anyone in particular, just putting it out there. Dennis opened his mouth to protest, but something in my tone made him stop. Maybe he heard the authority in it, the voice of someone who'd given orders under fire. Maybe he was just desperate enough to try anything. The dog's growl shifted pitch, became uncertain. I took one step forward, slow, deliberate, keeping my body language soft. The thing about broken things is they recognize each other. It's not something you can fake or manufacture. It's in the eyes, in the way you hold yourself, in the scars you don't bother hiding anymore. I've got a piece of shrapnel still lodged near my spine, too close to the nerve bundle for the surgeons to risk removing it. It aches when it rains. I've got burn scars on my left arm from a fuel fire that killed 3 men I served with. I've got the invisible scars too, the ones that make me check my 6 in grocery stores, that make fireworks on the 4th of July sound like incoming mortars, that make me see threats in shadows that aren't there. This dog had his own scars, the torn ear, the marks on his muzzle that suggested a fighting ring, though the shelter would probably never confirm it. The way he held his weight, ready to spring or retreat, never fully committed to either. We were 2 survivors in a room full of people who'd never been broken the way we had. I took another step. The dog's hackles were still up, but the growl had stopped. "I know," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "I know what they did to you." The shelter worker against the wall made a small sound, maybe a whimper, and the dog's attention snapped back to her for a second. I could see Dennis tensing with the catch pole, calculating whether he could get it around the dog's neck before things escalated. "Don't," I said, sharper this time. "You move with that pole and he'll bite her. He's scared, not mean. There's a difference." Dennis hesitated. I could see him wanting to argue, wanting to take control of his shelter, his emergency, his liability nightmare. But something kept him still. Maybe the certainty in my voice. Maybe desperation. The dog was looking at me again now, really looking. I lowered myself slowly, not to a knee but to a crouch, making myself smaller, less threatening. Every joint in my body protested. 71 years, and most of them hard. But I held the position. "They hurt you?" I continued, speaking to the dog like we were alone in the room. "Made you mean when you didn't want to be. Taught you that teeth and fear were the only things that kept you alive." The dog's ears came forward slightly. Still wary, still tense, but listening now. I've been in firefights where bullets snapped past my head so close, I felt the heat of them. I've had artillery land near enough to lift me off my feet and slam me into a wall. I've had men point rifles at my face and had to decide in a fraction of a second whether they were going to pull the trigger. This moment, crouched in a Memphis animal shelter with a traumatized dog between me and a terrified girl, felt just as dangerous. Maybe more so because I cared about the outcome. In combat, you train to detach, to operate on instinct and protocol. This was personal in a way I couldn't quite name yet. "I've been broken too," I said, and the truth of it settled over the room like dust after an explosion. "They'll tell you that you're too damaged, too dangerous, that you can't be fixed, can't be trusted, can't ever be part of the world again. They're wrong." The dog took a step toward me. Just one. His body was still tense, but the mathematics of the situation had shifted. He wasn't guarding territory anymore. He was deciding, evaluating, trying to figure out if I was a threat or something else. When I was 19 and fresh into the Army, Stationed at Fort Polk for basic training, there was a drill sergeant named Matthews who had it out for me from day one. Never said why, didn't have to. I was one of 3 black recruits in a company of 60 men, and Matthews had grown up in some small town in Georgia where the Confederacy was still fighting the war in people's minds. He never called me the slur directly, not where officers could hear, but he had other ways. Extra duty, impossible standards, public humiliation disguised as military discipline. The worst part wasn't the treatment itself. I'd grown up in Mississippi in the 60s. I knew that dance. It was watching the other recruits learn from his example. Seeing good men, or men who could have been good, decide that I was lesser because authority said so. By week 3, I was sleeping 3 hours a night, running extra miles to meet standards that kept changing, doing push-ups until my arms shook, and still being told I wasn't good enough. I wanted to quit. God, I wanted to quit. But something in me, pride, stubbornness, rage I couldn't safely express, kept me going. I would not give Matthews the satisfaction. The breaking point came during a field exercise in week 8. We were doing live fire drills in the Louisiana heat, temperatures pushing 95 degrees, humidity making the air feel like soup. Matthews had me carrying extra gear, an additional 40 pounds of sandbags in my rucksack, said it was because I'd been slacking on the obstacle course. Hadn't been. My times were middle of the pack, respectable for a new recruit. But facts didn't matter to Matthews, only the narrative he'd constructed about who I was and what I deserved. We were 5 miles into a 12-mile march when Jenkins, one of the white recruits who'd actually been decent to me, collapsed from heat exhaustion. Just went down like someone had cut his strings. The drill instructors called a halt, got water on him, called for the medics. Matthews walked the line while we waited, inspecting gear, looking for infractions. He stopped at me, looked at my rucksack, then at my face. "Open it," he said. I did. He pulled out the sandbags, held them up for the whole company to see. "You been carrying extra weight and didn't say nothing?" I kept my eyes forward. "Yes, drill sergeant." Something flickered across his face then. Not quite respect, but recognition maybe, that I'd been willing to suffer in silence rather than complain, rather than give him ammunition. He tossed the sandbags aside. "You're done with those," he said, and moved on. It wasn't an apology, wasn't even an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was something. A crack in the wall. The dog took another step toward me. We were 5 feet apart now. I could see his ribs through his coat, see the trembling in his back legs from sustained tension. How long had he been in this heightened state? Hours? Days? When you live in fight or flight mode long enough, it becomes your default. Your body forgets how to rest. I know that feeling intimately. The VA puts me on medications that are supposed to help me sleep, supposed to calm the hypervigilance, supposed to make me feel normal. They don't work, not really. You can't medicate away the fundamental rewiring that trauma does to your nervous system. "Come here," I said softly, extending my hand slowly, palm down, fingers relaxed. Not reaching for him, just offering. The choice was his. In the shelter behind me, nobody was breathing. The moment stretched out, endless, every second containing the possibility of violence or connection. The dog's nose twitched, scenting me. I could see him taking in information, my smell, my posture, the tone of my voice. Animals are honest in a way people aren't. They can't lie about what they sense. He came to me then, not with trust, but with a kind of desperate curiosity. His nose touched my hand, wet and cold, and I felt his whole body vibrating with tension. I didn't grab him, didn't try to pet him or control him. Just let him investigate, let him make the choice. Behind me, I heard Dennis exhale slowly. "Sir," he started, but I cut him off with a slight shake of my head. This moment was fragile. Any disruption could shatter it. The dog sniffed my hand, my wrist, working his way up my arm. His tail, which had been tucked tight against his body, loosened slightly. Not wagging, not yet. But not a weapon anymore either. I thought about Kuwait, about a particular night when our convoy got separated from the main force and we ended up in a village that wasn't on our maps. The locals could have killed us. We were outnumbered, outpositioned, lost in territory we didn't understand. But an old man came out of his house, moved slow like I was moving now, and offered us water and bread. Not because he agreed with our presence, not because he supported the war, but because in that moment we were human beings in need. That night in Kuwait still visits me in dreams. We'd been pushing north for 3 days, part of the ground offensive to liberate Kuwait City. The intelligence said the area was clear, that Iraqi forces had pulled back. Intelligence was wrong. They hit us at dusk, just as the light was failing and shadows made everything uncertain. RPGs, small arms fire, something heavier that might have been a Soviet-made DSHK heavy machine gun. Our lead vehicle took a hit, engine block shattered, and suddenly we were stationary targets in a killing zone. I remember the sound more than anything else. The specific crack of AK-47 fire, different from our M16s. The whoosh of rockets. Sergeant Miller screaming into the radio for air support that was 30 minutes out. 30 minutes might as well be 30 years in combat. We returned fire, trying to identify targets in the growing darkness, trying not to waste ammunition on shadows. Private Carson, 19 years old from some small town in Ohio, was next to me behind our disabled vehicle. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely change magazines. I put my hand on his shoulder, steadied him. "Breathe," I told him. "Controlled bursts. Pick your targets." He nodded, got himself together, started firing with purpose instead of panic. We held that position for 40 minutes before the cavalry arrived. Apache helicopters that lit up the night with their chain guns sent whoever was shooting at us running for cover. By then, 2 of our guys were wounded. The disabled vehicle was a smoking wreck, and we were all running on pure adrenaline and fear. I slowly brought my other hand up and let the dog sniff that one too. He was calmer now, the aggressive display draining away like water from a broken dam. I could see exhaustion underneath the fear. He was tired of being the monster everyone expected him to be. I knew that feeling too. How many times had I walked into rooms and watched people clutch their purses tighter? How many times had I been followed in stores by security guards who didn't know I'd served their country? How many times had I been pulled over for driving in the wrong neighborhood? When you're told often enough that you're dangerous, you start to become it, if only to meet expectations. Or you do what I did. You carry yourself with such rigid dignity that you become invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of spaces that were never meant to include you. The dog leaned his weight against my knee slightly, just a little pressure, testing. I placed my hand gently on the top of his head, between his ears, and felt him shudder. Not from fear now, from relief. He'd been holding that aggressive pose for so long that letting it go was almost painful. "Okay," I said to the room without turning around. "Somebody want to tell me this dog's story?" There was a shuffling sound, papers moving. The girl who'd been against the wall had slid down to sit on the floor, her hands shaking. Dennis still held the catch-pole but had lowered it. The woman behind the desk, an older black lady with graying hair and kind eyes, spoke up. "That's Brutus. Came in 3 weeks ago from a fighting ring bust. APD found him chained in a basement with 6 other dogs. 3 didn't make it." My jaw tightened. "What happened to the people running the ring?" "Still working its way through the courts," she said, and I heard the frustration in her voice. The people who'd broken this dog were probably out on bail, living their lives, while their victim waited in a concrete cell to be judged for the violence they'd taught him. "And you were going to euthanize him?" It wasn't a question. Dennis had the grace to look uncomfortable. "He's attacked 3 staff members in 2 weeks. Bit of volunteer. We can't adopt out a dog with that kind of aggression history. Liability alone. He's not aggressive, I interrupted. He's traumatized. There's a difference. The dog, Brutus, though I was already thinking of him as Gunner, pressed harder against my leg. I ran my hand down his back slowly, feeling the scars under his coat, the places where fur didn't grow right anymore. How much to adopt him? Dennis shook his head. Sir, with all respect, you don't understand what you're taking on. This dog requires experienced handling, behavioral rehabilitation, possibly medication. He's bit 4 people. If he hurts someone else, you're liable, legally and financially. I looked up at him then, met his eyes directly. I did 3 tours. 2 in Desert Storm, 1 in Afghanistan after 9/11. I've been shot at, blown up, and had my life threatened by enemies and allies both. I've trained men, buried men, and carried wounded men through situations that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. I think I can handle 1 scared dog. The room went very quiet. Dennis opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. The adoption fee is $75, but we'd need to do a home check, interview process, wait period. I'll give you $200. Cash, and I'm taking him today. My tone left no room for negotiation. There's a moment in combat when you realize the mission parameters have changed. The plan you started with is no longer viable. You can either adapt or die. Good soldiers learn to pivot, to assess new realities and act decisively. Dennis was assessing now, running calculations, liability of adopting out an aggressive dog versus liability of euthanizing a dog that someone was clearly bonding with. The optics of denying a black veteran who'd served his country. The simple fact that I was offering him a solution to a problem that was costing his shelter resources and staff safety. I'll need you to sign extended liability waivers, he finally said, and we'll require updates, proof of training, vet records. Done. I stood slowly, my knees cracking, and the dog stood with me, pressed against my side like he'd always been there. The shelter worker who'd been on the floor was being helped up by her co-workers. She looked at me with something like awe. "How did you do that?" she asked, her voice still shaky. I looked at the dog, then back at her. I didn't do anything. I just recognized what I was looking at. The paperwork took 40 minutes. I sat in a plastic chair in Dennis's office while he printed out forms and made copies, the dog lying at my feet with his head on my boot. He didn't leave my side once. Didn't even look at the other staff members who passed by the office door. He'd chosen me as decisively as I'd chosen him. The kind woman from behind the desk brought me a bottle of water and a small bowl for Gunner. "That was something," she said quietly. 3 weeks we've been trying to find some way to reach him. You walked in and just knew." I took the water gratefully. "What's your name?" "Lorraine," she said. "I've been working here 15 years. Never seen anything quite like that." "Lorraine," I said. "You ever been to war?" She shook her head. "Then you've never had to learn what real trauma looks like, what it does to a mind, how it changes the way you see threats." I scratched behind Gunner's ear and he made a sound that wasn't quite a growl, more like a rumble of contentment. "This dog and I, we speak the same language." Dennis came back with the final paperwork, a stack of forms that required my signature in a dozen places. Liability waivers, agreements to provide veterinary care, promises to attend behavioral training, acknowledgement that I was adopting a dog with a documented bite history. I signed everything without reading it. What were they going to do? Sue a 71-year-old veteran living on a fixed income? Take my house? I'd lost more important things than property. "I need to tell you," Dennis said, and his tone had shifted to something more human, less administrator. "That dog's been scheduled for euthanasia twice. We kept postponing because—" he trailed off. "Because you knew he deserved better." I finished for him. He nodded. Yeah, because of that. I stood and offered him my hand. He took it, his grip firm. You're doing a good thing taking him. But if anything happens, it won't, I said. We understand each other. And it was true. As I walked out of that shelter with Gunnar on a borrowed leash, the afternoon sun bright on the asphalt parking lot, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Connection. The sense that maybe broken things could still serve each other. The drive home was quiet. Gunnar sat in the passenger seat of my old Ford pickup, stiff and alert, watching the world pass by the window with the intensity of a soldier on patrol. Every sudden movement made him tense. Every loud noise, a truck horn, a car door slamming, made him flinch. I understood completely. For the first few years after I came back from Kuwait, I couldn't sit with my back to a door, couldn't handle crowds, couldn't sleep without checking every window and door in the house 3 times. My wife, God rest her soul, she learned to live with my rituals, my hypervigilance, my silences. She never pushed me to talk about the war until I was ready. And when I finally was ready, years later, she listened without judgment. I miss her every day. I miss having someone who understood that the war never really ends. It just gets quieter sometimes. I glanced at Gunnar and saw him looking at me, those brown eyes still wary but no longer wild. You're safe now, I told him. I know you don't believe me yet. That's okay. I'll prove it to you. One day at a time. My house sits on a corner lot in North Memphis, a neighborhood that's seen better days but still has its dignity. The house itself is small, a 2-bedroom post-war bungalow my father bought in 1965, when the city was still heavily segregated and black families were limited in where they could live. He paid twice what it was worth because the white sellers knew they had him over a barrel. He didn't complain. He worked 2 jobs to make the mortgage, raised 4 kids in this house, and left it to me when he died. I've kept it maintained, painted the same neat cream color my mother chose, kept the yard trimmed even though my back protests the work now. It's not much, but it's mine. Paid off. A small piece of earth that belongs to me and nobody can take away. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Gunnar was up immediately, alert, assessing this new environment. I opened my door slowly and came around to his side, opening the passenger door and stepping back to give him space. Come on, I said. Let me show you home. He jumped down, not graceful but determined, and followed me up the concrete path to the front door. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Clean but sparse. My wife had liked decorations, little touches that made a house feel warm. Photos on the walls, throw pillows on the couch, plants on the windowsills. After she died, I'd kept most of it, unable to pack away her touches even though they sometimes hurt to look at. The living room held a worn couch, a coffee table with a few military history books stacked on it, and a TV I rarely watched. The walls had photos from my service years, me in dress uniform, young and serious. My platoon in Kuwait, squinting against the sun. A group photo from Afghanistan, all of us older, harder, more aware of what we were doing there. Gunnar sniffed everything carefully, working the perimeter of the room with systematic precision. I recognized the behavior, clearing corners, checking for threats, establishing a mental map of the space. I let him work. After about 10 minutes, he came back to me and sat down, leaning against my leg again. That simple gesture of trust hit me harder than I expected. I had to clear my throat before I could speak. You hungry? I asked. His ears perked up at the tone, even if he didn't know the word yet. In the kitchen, I found a bowl and filled it with water, then searched through my cabinets. I didn't have dog food, hadn't planned this, but I had ground beef in the freezer and rice in the pantry. I cooked a simple meal for him while he watched from the doorway, not entering the kitchen but not leaving me either. When the food was cool enough, I set it down in the living room and stepped back. He approached cautiously, sniffed it thoroughly, then ate like he was starving. Which he probably was. Shelter food is adequate, but not plentiful, and stress makes it hard to eat anyway. I knew that feeling too. In Kuwait, even when we had hot meals, I could barely force food down. The adrenaline, the heat, the constant awareness of being in hostile territory, it all killed the appetite. You ate because you had to, because not eating meant weakness, and weakness meant death. I watched Gunnar finish every bite and lick the bowl clean. When he looked up at me, something had shifted in his eyes. Not trust yet, but the possibility of trust. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to hurt him. That first night was hard for both of us. I made a bed for Gunnar out of old blankets in the corner of my bedroom, figuring he'd want his own space. He ignored it completely. When I lay down in my own bed, he jumped up without asking and positioned himself at the foot, his body angled toward the door. Guard position. I should have made him get down, established boundaries, done the things dog trainers say you're supposed to do. Instead, I let him stay. The weight of him on the bed was comforting. I'd been sleeping alone for 3 years, and the emptiness of it had been crushing. Now there was another living being sharing the space, another heart beating in the darkness. We were both awake for hours, listening to the house settle, to cars passing on the street, to the world outside continuing in its indifferent way. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I heard Gunnar's breathing slow and deepen. He was asleep. I followed him down shortly after. For the first time in months, I slept 6 hours straight. No nightmares about Kuwait. No dreams of burning vehicles or friends screaming. Just deep, black sleep. When I woke up, Gunnar was watching me with those brown eyes, patient, waiting. "Morning," I said. His tail thumped once against the comforter. It was a start. The second night was worse. Around 3 in the morning, a car backfired on the street outside. The sound punched through my sleep like a gunshot, and I was up before I was fully awake, heart hammering, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. My mind convinced I was back in the desert with incoming fire. Gunnar was up too, barking, his whole body rigid with fear and aggression. For a moment we were both lost in our respective hells, two traumatized creatures reacting to a phantom threat. Then I saw him, really saw him. Saw my own panic reflected in his eyes, and something in me shifted. "Hey," I said, my voice rough with adrenaline. "Hey, it's okay. We're home. We're safe." I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands still shaking, and Gunnar came to me slowly. He pressed his head against my chest, and I felt him trembling. Or maybe that was me. Maybe it was both of us. I wrapped my arms around him, this damaged creature who'd been taught that violence was the only language that mattered, and I held on. "We're okay," I whispered into his fur. "We're both okay." We sat like that until the shaking stopped, until our heartbeats returned to normal, until the world outside remained quiet and peaceful, and the phantom threats receded back into memory where they belonged. That's when I knew for certain that I hadn't just adopted a dog. I'd found a partner who understood the specific hell of living with trauma. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. I took Gunnar to the vet, got him checked out, updated his shots, had his ear examined where it had been torn. The vet, a young white woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, asked carefully about his history. I told her the truth: fighting ring rescue, trauma history, bite record. She handled him with confidence and respect, talking to him the whole time, explaining what she was doing. Gunnar tolerated the examination but kept his eyes on me the entire time, seeking reassurance. "He's bonded to you strongly," she observed. "That's good. He trusts you. But he's going to need work. Socialization, behavioral training. I can recommend some specialists." I took the referral sheets but never called them. I'd been through enough VA therapy sessions to know how those conversations went. Well-meaning professionals with textbooks and degrees trying to fix something they'd never experienced. I'd figure it out my own way, the way I'd figured out my own trauma. Through time, patience, and the understanding that some things can't be fixed, only managed. We walked every morning at dawn, Gunnar and I, through the neighborhood streets as the city woke up. He was reactive at first, lunging at other dogs, barking at sudden noises, suspicious of every person we passed. The third week, during one of our walks, we encountered Mr. Peterson from 3 houses down. He was a Korean War vet, older than me by a decade, white hair and a limp from a leg wound he'd carried for 60 years. He stopped when he saw us, stood still, let Gunnar assess him. "Marine," he said to me, a statement, not a question. "Army," I replied. "2 Gulf tours and Afghanistan." He nodded slowly. "That one's got the look," he said, gesturing to Gunnar with his chin. "Fighting dog?" "Was. Not anymore." Peterson considered that. Then he reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a dog treat, held it in his open palm. "May I?" I almost said no. Gunnar was still unpredictable around strangers, but something about Peterson's bearing, the calm authority of a man who'd seen his own share of violence and learned to live with it, made me nod. Peterson approached at an angle, non-threatening, his movements economical and sure. He spoke to Gunnar in a low voice, words I couldn't quite hear, and extended his hand with the treat. Gunnar sniffed it, suspicious, then gently took it. "Good boy," Peterson said. He looked at me. "You did right, taking him. They tried to put me in therapy after Korea. Didn't help. You know what helped? Time, work, purpose. Same thing that'll help your dog." He walked away after that, and I never forgot it. One veteran to another, acknowledging the thing we all know but don't say, that healing happens on its own timeline, in its own way, and sometimes the best medicine is simply being useful to someone or something. But I worked with him, day after day, teaching him that not everything was a threat. When he tensed up, I'd stop, let him observe, wait for him to calm before moving on. Forcing him forward would only confirm his fears. He had to learn at his own pace that the world wasn't entirely hostile. It was the same process I'd gone through after coming home. Learning to trust that not every backfire was gunfire. Not every crowded space was an ambush. Not every stranger was an enemy. It took months, years really, and even now I'm not sure I'm entirely deprogrammed, but I'm functional. I can go to the grocery store without having a panic attack. I can sit in restaurants with my back to the door, even if I don't enjoy it. I can live something approximating a normal life. I wanted that for Gunnar too. We met Lorraine from the shelter on one of our walks about a month in. She was coming out of a convenience store with coffee, and her face lit up when she saw us. "Is that Brutus?" she asked, approaching slowly. Gunnar tensed but didn't lunge. "Progress." "We call him Gunnar now," I said. She knelt down carefully and extended her hand. Gunnar sniffed it, uncertain, then allowed her to pet his head briefly before pulling back. Lorraine looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "This is incredible," she said. "You've done amazing work with him." "Hey?" I shook my head. "I haven't done anything special. I just gave him space to heal." "That's the most special thing there is," she replied. She stood, wiping at her eyes. "Dennis told me to tell you if I ever saw you, that you should bring him by the shelter sometime, show the staff, they ask about him." "Maybe," I said, non-committal. The truth was, I didn't want to take Gunnar back there. Places hold memories, especially traumatic ones. The smell of that shelter, the sounds, the confined spaces, it might undo months of progress. Besides, we were doing fine on our own, learning each other's rhythms, building trust brick by brick. I didn't need validation from shelter staff or behavioral specialists to know we were making it work. Lorraine understood, I think. She smiled and squeezed my arm gently. "You take care of each other," she said. "That's what matters." We did. We took care of each other. On the days when my back hurt too much to stand for long, Gunnar would lie beside me on the couch, his warmth easing the ache better than any medication. On the days when loud noises sent him spiraling into fear aggression, I'd sit with him in the quiet house, speaking low and calm until he remembered where he was. Safe. Home. With someone who understood. The neighborhood kids learned to give us space at first, but gradually, as they saw Gunnar's behavior improve, they'd ask to pet him. I'd let them, one at a time, teaching them how to approach slowly, to read his body language, to respect his boundaries. He never bit anyone. Never even came close. The dog that the shelter had deemed too dangerous to live learned to tolerate children, to enjoy gentle petting, to wag his tail when he saw familiar faces. People called it a miracle. I called it what happens when you treat trauma with understanding instead of punishment. There was one incident, though, about 8 months in, that showed me how far Gunnar had really come. I was on the porch reading the newspaper, Gunnar lying in the sun beside my chair. 3 kids from the block were playing basketball in the street, boys around 12 or 13, loud and energetic the way kids that age are. The ball got away from them, bounced into my yard, rolled up near the porch steps. One of the boys, Marcus, the Johnson's grandson who visited every summer, came running after it without thinking. He was up the steps before I could say anything, reaching for the ball, and Gunnar was on his feet instantly, that old defensive instinct triggered by the sudden approach. I saw it happen in slow motion. Gunnar tensing, his body language shifting to protective mode, not aggressive but warning, ready to defend his territory and his person. Marcus froze, suddenly aware of the dog, of his mistake. The other kids in the street went quiet. This was the moment. The test. Everything we'd worked on for months came down to this split second. "Gunnar," I said, firm but calm. "Sit." He looked at me, conflicted, his training warring with his instincts. Then he sat. Just like that, the tension drained from his posture. He was still alert, still watching Marcus, but the threat response had been interrupted. I nodded to Marcus. "It's okay. Get your ball. Just move slow." Marcus did, his hand shaking slightly as he picked up the basketball. Then, showing either bravery or foolishness, he paused. "Can I pet him?" he asked. Every adult instinct in me wanted to say no, wanted to protect both of them from a mistake that could undo months of progress. But I looked at Gunnar, saw him sitting calmly now, saw his tail do that one thump against the porch boards, and I nodded. "One hand. Let him smell you first. And if he tenses up, you back away slow. Understand?" Marcus nodded, dead serious. He extended his hand, and Gunnar sniffed it, then allowed the boy to stroke his head once, twice. Then Marcus smiled, said, "Thank you, sir," and ran back to his friends. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The months turned into a year. Then 2. My daughter came to visit from California and was shocked by the change in me. "Dad," she said, watching me and Gunnar on the porch, "you seem lighter." I considered that. Did I feel lighter? Maybe. The weight was still there. The memories, the losses, the accumulated damage of a life lived hard. But I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. I had a companion who knew what it meant to be broken, and who'd chosen to heal alongside me. Sarah stayed for a week that visit, her first time home since her mother's funeral. We hadn't talked much in the years between, not because of anger, but because of grief that we didn't know how to share. She'd lost her mother. I'd lost my wife. Both losses were valid, both devastating, but they existed in different spaces. We'd been orbiting each other from a distance, connected, but not close. Gunnar changed that somehow. On the 3rd day, we were in the kitchen making dinner together, my mother's recipe for smothered chicken that Sarah had asked for, and Gunnar was lying in the doorway, watching us both. "Tell me about him," Sarah said, The real story, not the happy adoption story you told me on the phone. So I did. I told her about the shelter, the fear in that room, the recognition I'd seen in Gunner's eyes. I told her about the nightmares we'd both had, about the backfiring car, and holding each other through the panic. I told her about learning to trust again, both of us slowly and imperfectly. She listened, stirring the gravy, and when I finished, she was crying quietly. "I was worried about you, Dad," she said. "After Mom died, you got so quiet, so distant. I didn't know how to reach you." Uh, I didn't know how to be reached, I admitted. Everything felt wrong, like I was supposed to die first, like I'd survived things I shouldn't have survived, and then she was gone, and nothing made sense. Sarah nodded, wiped her eyes. "Does it make sense now?" I looked at Gunnar, who was watching us with those intelligent eyes. "Not really, but it hurts less. Or maybe I'm just better at carrying it." Before she left, Sarah knelt down next to Gunnar and put her hand on his head. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "Thank you for taking care of my dad. And I swear that dog understood. I'm 71 now, and Gunnar is getting old too. His muzzle is gray, his movements slower. We both creak in the mornings, both take our time getting up, both need naps in the afternoon sun. We're a pair of old soldiers, retired from active duty but still standing. Still here. Still fighting the small daily battles against the memories that try to pull us under. When people ask me about him now, about the dog that was going to be put down because he was too broken to save, I tell them the truth. I didn't save him. He saved me. Gave me a reason to get up in the mornings. Gave me something to care for when I'd stopped caring about much of anything. Reminded me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That trauma doesn't define your value. That sometimes the most damaged things can still serve each other, can still offer something beautiful and necessary. I think about that day at the shelter sometimes, the moment when our eyes met across that lobby. Two traumatized beings, both judged dangerous by a world that didn't understand the difference between aggression and fear. Both written off as unfixable. Both proving them wrong, one day at a time. Last month, Gunnar had a scare. He stopped eating for 3 days, just lay on his bed barely moving, and I knew something was wrong. I carried him to the truck. He's 70 pounds and I'm not young, but I managed, and drove him to the emergency vet. They found a mass in his abdomen. Cancer, probably. They could operate, the young vet said, but at his age, with his history, the survival rate wasn't good. "What's his quality of life like now?" she asked. I looked at Gunnar on the examination table, his eyes finding mine, trusting me to make the right choice. "Good," I said. "He's happy, comfortable. We take walks, sit on the porch, sleep in the same bed. He's got dignity." She nodded. "Then I'd recommend palliative care, pain management. Let him live his life for as long as it's still a good life. When that changes, when you see him suffering, then we make the hard choice." I agreed. What else could I do? He'd given me years of companionship, pulled me back from a dark place I'm not sure I would have survived. I owed him the same dignity he'd restored in me. Now we're both on borrowed time, both living with conditions that can't be fixed. His cancer. My heart, which the VA doctors say is showing its age, and my war. My joints that ache with old injuries and older arthritis. We're a matched set, breaking down in synchronization. But there's peace in that too. Neither of us has to pretend we're okay when we're not. Neither of us has to perform health or strength we don't possess. We can just be two old veterans, supporting each other through the final march. The lesson I learned, the one I hope others might understand, is that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about learning to live with the breaks, to build strength around the damaged places, to accept that you're never going to be what you were before, but you can be something different, something that endured. I learned it in the war. Learned it coming home. And I learned it again from a scarred pit bull with one torn ear who taught me that survival itself is a form of courage. That choosing to trust again after you've been hurt is the bravest thing any creature can do. I think about the soldiers I served with, the ones who made it home and the ones who didn't. I think about Jenkins, who collapsed in the Louisiana heat during basic training, who went on to do 2 tours in Iraq and came home with medals and nightmares. I think about Carson, the kid from Ohio who couldn't hold his rifle steady, who steadied himself and became one of the best shots in our unit. I think about the ones who came home in boxes, who never got the chance to figure out what healing might look like. And I think about the ones who made it home physically but couldn't make it home mentally, who lost the battle with their own memories in quiet rooms years after the shooting stopped. The military teaches you a lot of things: how to follow orders, how to operate under pressure, how to survive in hostile environments. But it doesn't teach you how to be broken, that you have to learn on your own. And the lesson is this: brokenness doesn't mean you're finished. It means you've survived something that broke lesser things. The cracks are proof of endurance, not evidence of failure. Gunnar taught me that more clearly than any therapist or medication ever could. Every scar on his body was a testament to the fact that he'd survived. Every fearful reaction was proof that his instincts had kept him alive when circumstances were trying to kill him. The goal wasn't to erase the scars or eliminate the fear. The goal was to build a life where the scars could exist without shame and the fear could coexist with trust. These days, when the helicopters fly over Memphis, heading to the hospital or the news station, and the sound of their rotors pulls me back to Kuwait, back to the desert and the fear and the chaos, Gunnar presses against my leg. He doesn't know why he does it. It's instinct, empathy, the understanding that passes between beings who've both been in darkness. And it helps. The sound is still the same, still triggers the same cascade of memories and adrenaline, but I'm not alone in it anymore. We sit on the porch in the evening light, me in my chair and Gunnar at my feet, and watch the neighborhood move through its routines. Kids playing basketball in the street, cars pulling into driveways, the smell of someone's dinner cooking. Ordinary life, continuing in its ordinary way. There's peace in that. Not the absence of pain. I don't think that exists for people like us, but the presence of something stronger than the pain. Purpose, connection, the simple fact of being needed and needing in return. If this story found you at the right time, tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes sharing difficult memories helps carry the weight. And if you know someone who's struggling with war, with trauma, with the particular loneliness of being broken in a world that doesn't understand, tell them this: there's another broken thing out there waiting to meet you. Another survivor who speaks your language. You just have to be willing to recognize each other when you do.